Welcome to the Finance Marketing Podcast, a show that empowers finance professionals to market their businesses in ways that feel good and actually achieve results. I'm your host, Hillary. I've been working with folks in financial services to develop marketing strategies that work and create results-oriented marketing content since 2020. And I've learned a lot about what works in finance marketing, what doesn't work, and where financial services pros get stuck. Join us each Friday as we explore real, effective ways to market your finance business and connect with folks who truly embody your ideal clients. My guest this week is Martin Kamenski, founder and principal of Revel CPA, a firm dedicated to serving creative entrepreneurs, agencies, and content creators. Martin and I connected at FinCon a few months ago, and we immediately hit it off when I mentioned I was rereading The E-Myth Revisited, because it turns out that Martin is the former CEO of E-Myth Worldwide's coaching division, leading their global network of business coaches. So needless to say, Martin knows a thing or two about business operations and systems. Today, Martin is running Revel CPA, where his team works primarily with creative professionals, many of whom are doing exactly what financial advisors are doing, which is creating content, building personal brands, and pairing those efforts with their professional services. So this conversation was really great because Martin bridged the world of accounting and creativity, giving him a really unique perspective on how AI and automation are reshaping professional services firms across the board right now. So we dove into the tension between automation and authenticity in marketing. We talk about why clients and consumers are hungrier than ever for real human connection as AI-generated content floods across social media, floods across the email inboxes, floods across everything, and how financial advisors specifically can use this shift to their advantage by leaning into more authentic and unpolished content. Martin also shared a really brilliant strategy around proactively communicating your AI policies with clients, which is becoming a more important conversation for professional service providers to have as clients are wondering, what is being done with my data? How are you using AI to serve me? How are you using AI to educate me? All of these sticky questions. And so having clear AI policies and being able to communicate those in a way that makes both you and your clients feel comfortable is really important. And then finally, Martin and I also talked about how to redefine your value proposition as AI is able to handle more technical work, focusing your marketing and your conversations with clients on those irreplaceable human elements of advisory relationships. So we covered a lot in this conversation, but it'll still give you really practical insights into navigating AI adoption in your firm while actually strengthening your client relationships and marketing position. So without further ado, let's dive in. Martin, thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of the Finance Marketing Podcast. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing great. I'm great. Happy to be here.
Good. Well, I'm excited for this conversation. You and I met a couple months ago at FinCon and we immediately connected. I just mentioned, in passing that I was reading The E-Myth Revisited, and you let me know, oh, you're a former CEO of E-Myth. Is that right?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. That was during my chapter of my life that was over on the West Coast. And I was the CEO of that business for a little over 3 years, the coaching arm of that company. So out of the book came a whole business coaching division. They've got a really amazing network of coaches all around the world that are working business owners through the process, through those different ideas that were in the book.
Yeah. What a background. Well, tell us a little bit about what you do now.
Yeah. Right now, I'm running a CPA firm called Revel CPA, and we are an accounting firm that's focused on serving needs of creative entrepreneurs. So particularly folks that run businesses in the creative sector, like a lot of agency style businesses, marketing, branding, design agencies, creative consultancies. We've got some talent agent shops as well, and other professional services organizations. We also work with a number of authors, speaker, writer types, influencers, content creators lately. Has been kind of a faster growing pocket for us. So we're helping these folks navigate the world of business and taxes, which in our humble opinion was not necessarily designed for creative folks to navigate or understand easily. And so we try to act as a guide along the way, not just getting the things done for them, but also sharing, educating, making sure that we're helping the clients understand not just what we're doing, but like why are we doing the things that we're doing for them.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, I see a lot of overlap between the clients that you guys work with and the clients that I work with, and a lot of my listeners, as financial advisors and CPAs are thinking about how to market themselves. A lot of them are writing books. A lot of them are in their own right, becoming content creators, showing up on YouTube, showing up on social media, creating content on blogs and things like that. Do you work with clients who also, pair their content creation with services as well?
I mean, that's an interesting question. I think, like you said, these days it's kind of hard to have online presence without also doing that aspect of content creation. So we do have a number of folks that bridge that gap, right? They are both providing services, but also putting things out, whether it's blogs, newsletters, videos. I mean, these days, I would say most recently this year in particular, what I'm hearing from our clients is that they're actually starting to see the most traction through channels like YouTube, LinkedIn, right? Some of these areas where they're getting maybe a little bit more high quality engagement with folks as opposed to, some of the other social media platforms. But any way that people can get reach, can get their word out, can engage with community, I think we're all looking for those ways to connect with folks, especially if in an authentic way, if you can, right? I know I was just talking with someone the other day about AI and its use and influence and presence in social media and content generation. And I'm hearing, and I think, I don't know, I even feel this a little bit myself, this like hunger for someone real, like just a person,
Mm-hmm.
talk to their camera, like authentically, you and me right now, because we see so much these days where you look at a post and right away, like, oh, that was a generative AI content calendar schedule that suggested this with generative copy and a generative image, and the whole thing just happened on autopilot. There's nobody behind the scenes there. So yeah, it's interesting times.
It is interesting times. And I think that, I think AI came on the scene almost exactly 2 years ago. And I just can't believe how much better it's gotten since 2023 when it came on. I'm curious. I mean, I have so many questions. I'm struggling to figure out which one to ask first. But I think as CPAs and accountants, you guys see so much into the back end of businesses, right? And how businesses are being affected numbers wise, revenue wise, by things like AI and automation coming on the scene.
Yeah.
In the past 2 years, has there been any trends that you've noticed? And if not, I mean, maybe it's still too early to tell, but is there anything that you've noticed in some of these more creative businesses as these
Yeah.
things have changed?
Yeah. Thankfully, I can't say that any of our clients have experienced, a significant kind of material impact or decline in terms of the volume of their business or their size of the engagements, that kind of thing. And I think a lot of that has to do with where we are today in the AI journey. Like you said, from 2 years ago when practically nobody was using it on a daily basis to fast forwarding to today, it's almost hard to clock like
Mm-hmm.
just how rapidly and in how many different ways that AI has infiltrated all these different aspects of our lives. But in some other really practical ways, it's not all the way there. It's not a complete replacement for that graphic designer, for this copywriter, for these people who are doing really valuable work for businesses, because I can ask it to make me a one-page PDF flyer with these kind of details, but odds are pretty good it's going to still goof up some of the imagery, and it'll have like a fake computer screen with like Klingon looking language in the background, and it's not quite there. So we're not seeing that yet. And again, I think the more that we do start to use AI in generative tools in all these different aspects of our lives to make tedious things go by quicker, to automate processes, all that kind of stuff, I think it is actually heightening everyone's desire for real human personal connection. And anytime you're talking about brands connecting with other brands, business to business interaction, that human connection is like, that's the root of the whole thing. So people are meeting at conferences like you and I did, and talking more and picking up actual conversation. So yeah, I do see not too much impact on the revenue side. And when we're talking about spend, it's sort of all over the board, right? Some folks might be surprised to hear that, or maybe not. There are still plenty of businesses who are like, nope, not going to touch it. I don't believe in it. I'm nervous about it, whatever. And I think especially in the creative community, right, there's some resistance and even maybe disdain for these tools, which have, in a large part, like built up their knowledge on work, sometimes creative work, that folks have put out over hundreds of years, and rightly so. But at the same time, it's like we've opened Pandora's box. It is where it is at this point. And so we have people not using it that much. We have people testing the waters a little bit. And then we have firms and clients that are going full on developing their own strategies around AI, how they're using it internally, how in some cases they're using it in their actual service delivery, which prompts all kinds of other fun questions. Like, if you're using AI to deliver services to your client, do you talk about that with your client? Do you not? Do you want them to know? That kind of thing. So a lot of fun conversations happening in business meetings around the world today.
Absolutely. I know I've seen posts on LinkedIn from advisors specifically, and there's really two camps. There's the camp of advisors who think, oh, AI will never replace me because so much of my job involves that human element and having empathy and helping people look at all these aspects of their financial situation that they hadn't even considered. And then there's the other camp of advisors who are like, no, this is a real concern. People are using ChatGPT in place of reaching out to an advisor and getting what they, at least what they think they need from it, right? There's probably a lot of blind spots and gaps. Where do you fall in that kind of spectrum?
Yeah. I mean, what people think they need, right? That's a funny thought. Probably anybody who's looked up some symptoms on ChatGPT and try to like self-diagnose themselves and then walk into a doctor's office and say, I have this kind of condition, I need the treatment, right? The doctor's right away going to be like, oh, okay, let's back up a second. What is
Right.
actually happening, right? Because we can ask questions of these kinds of tools, but inherently the questions are limited to our own understanding, right? And so they may not always end up pointing in the direction that's in the person's best interest. I don't know. Personally, I do like when clients come with some background questions, with some ideas, with some knowledge, because it makes for a much more rich and impactful conversation, right? We can kind of cut through some of it because they've done a little of their own homework. It's less fun when someone shows up and they say something like, why didn't you have me use da 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 kind of strategy? I should be doing this. And if you find out eventually how they got that idea, and it's because, these days usually either I saw it on TikTok or ChatGPT told me to, right? Again, then we have to back up and put that hat on as an advisor and say, let's talk about what's actually happening. How did you get to that decision? What are you trying to do? And then we can talk about the best way to get there. I think it was just this week or maybe last where OpenAI actually rolled out a slight change to that model, which now is preventing the tool from literally putting out financial planning guidance. Like, it actually has tried to create a little bit of barrier there, which the financial planning industry is looking at as a very interesting development, right? So OpenAI as a company has identified that, they don't want that risk. They don't want to be making recommendations to people about which investments they should get into, that kind of thing. So in a way, that the potential for encroachment into like taking over the role of a financial advisor has just been throttled back a little. But the more kind of existential question is still there, right? Anyone listening would probably think like, okay, well, they've made that decision now. That doesn't mean they can't unmake the choice later and decide they are going to let this thing give recommendations. And then what? And again, I think for the people who you're serving as a professional advisor, if you are providing high touch, relationship based services where you're kind of taking in a broad context of what someone's goals are and making thoughtful recommendations, I believe we are still a good number of years away from any kind of tool being able to do something like that. Probably by then, we will also have cured all diseases and be living in a very different world. So in the meantime, right, I like to encourage folks to lean in, to do research, ask questions, get some information, and then bring those conversations to your advisor. I also think it's an interesting potential marketing tactic or a little wedge you can use to distinguish yourself out there in the space as somebody who's not afraid of it, right? As somebody who's willing to talk about it. I think the stats are pretty clear right now in most small businesses that whether you have an AI policy or not, whether you have given your team AI tools or not, they're using it. Like your team is using it, the employees are using it with or without your guidance. And it's the same out there in the world with all of our clients. Like that they are using it. They're asking the questions. So if you come out kind of leading in that space and saying, hey, here's 5 great questions to ask ChatGPT every month about your finances, and sort of playing the role of encouraging what it could look like to do it well, then that's a space that not as many people are stepping into today.
I agree with you. I think that absolutely sets you apart. And, for advisors who are saying, oh, AI can never replace me, it's not a problem, I think that's just kind of putting the blinders on a little bit. And I think it all comes down to everybody's using AI, whether you believe they are or not, or whether you tell them to or not, they're going to be asking those questions. So leaning into that is going to be really important. How do you see advisors and CPAs and accounting firms like yourself? How do you see the best ways that they can use AI in their own firms and businesses to be more efficient, to be more effective? And are there any lines there that you think shouldn't be crossed?
Sure. Yeah. I guess one place to start is if we kind of accept the idea that we are here and we're not trying to go anywhere, but also AI is now a part of our world and it's not going to go anywhere. The question to most advising professionals out there should be right now, how are we thinking about evolving what we do? And that is how you don't get replaced. That is how this becomes something that evolves the work, but doesn't step in and completely erase a whole industry or profession. I wasn't around for this, but I have heard from people who were that way back when, at the very beginning invention of the spreadsheet, when the first spreadsheet kind of hit the market, and there were people at that time who came out and said, this is the end of accounting. Accountants will be not needed anymore, right? Now we have these spreadsheet tools, and as those evolved and got better, they were like, this is surely the end of the industry, right? And of course, it didn't. It just made the way that we do things different. And then same thing happened with like cloud computing, accounting software, QuickBooks, Xero. These guys came to the market, and the same thing. So this is the end of accountants. Obviously not. So it keeps evolving what we do. And if we focus on what we are trying to grow into and build into, then it gives you a better perspective on the things that you're willing to let go of. Like what do I not have to attach my identity to? Like maybe it's not so important for me to do to have authored every bit of this plan, and I can use some text, I can give it guidelines and then generate some text to give specific instructions. And I guess in our case, as we think about the evolution of our service design at Revel, where we are looking now is how to go from the services that we're providing to clients, and instead to be talking about the transformation we're trying to help them move through. So, in other words, where are you today? Where are you trying to go? And then how do we package our work? How do we kind of pitch our services in a way that positions us as a guide to help you get from A to B? And then the services we're providing are just kind of a means to get there. But really what you're selling is that future vision of themselves with whatever different life goals, business goals, whatever you are there to make happen for them. Because again, generative AI is not capable of that degree of future vision, at least not right now, or that kind of holistic holding of a human experience. As someone else once said kind of recently, when you work with AI, it's like talking to somebody who has read every single book in the entire library, but they've only ever lived in the library. They have no means of understanding or connecting to any emotional experience, any human personal journey, right? And if you're talking about people and their relationship with money and like their goals for financial success in their life, whatever that means for them, you kind of can't avoid the human side of it, the personal part. Right? That's the whole ballgame.
Right. I really love that analogy. Like AI can have all the book smarts in the world, but it's never going to have the street smarts that are actually going to bring things to life.
Exactly. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Mm-hmm. When professionals like advisors, CPAs, even attorneys are using AI in their work, do you think that there needs to be any concern or regard for confidentiality and client confidentiality in these tools, and where do you see the line kind of there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's super important. And if you back up one one layer behind that, even all of this should start with conversations in that team, or with your people who are leading, making decisions for your organization about what your AI strategy is, right? So rather than deciding these things kind of circumstance by circumstance, situation by situation, we want to understand, how are we doing this organizationally? What are the goals? What are the risks that we're noticing that we want to make sure we safeguard against, and allow that strategy to drive these kind of decisions? So I know that there are some firms and some professionals out there who are using generative AI both internally and in work with clients, like in client-facing materials, deliverables, that kind of stuff, who don't disclose that, don't talk about it at all. I also know there are others who are very open about that, and they are, in some cases, leaning the entire opposite direction and like touting it, saying, we are utilizing these tools and you want us to, like, you want us to be taking this busy work off our plate, letting these things happen more efficiently, because that means we get to deliver better service to you. Now, the trick is, if you do it that way, you actually then have to deliver better service to them and not just take your time savings and then end up toes up on the beach.
Right.
But if you do it the right way, right? If you tell them, look, here's why we are doing these things, and this is what it's saving us in time, and we're able to reinvest that in our relationship with you, provide these other insights, that kind of thing. There's no client today, I don't think, that is going to stand in, strict opposition to that. And you may end up even attracting some folks who might be kind of modern minded, progressive business owners anyway. And maybe that's more in line with your ideal client profile. So you have a choice, right? Where you want to go on that spectrum. And regardless of your strategy and how vocal you are or not about how you use these tools, clients' security, their privacy, the privacy of their PII, that identifiable information, has to be the number one concern. That means some really basic things. I mean, I imagine most of your audience knows this already, but if you are using any free version of any of these tools, right, you are contributing your information to that tool. Some people like to say, like, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And so it's your data. They want that. They want the information. They want everything you're feeding in. So you would have to be on a paid plan, and you also have to pay attention, service to service, what those different plans are, and really specifically what is and isn't retained by the model, what is and isn't transferred in an entirely encrypted way from back to front. And so, for example, our team had to upgrade to like the Teams version or the business plan on ChatGPT in order to meet the bar that we set for ourselves in terms of security of information. Now, even that said, right, even though we are paying for this bigger version of chat, it still doesn't mean that we're loading, we're just throwing a tax return into that system as is. But we are experimenting with using it in some ways to do some analysis, including, writing up an entire summary of someone's situation and putting it in there and saying, what would you recommend? What are some things we might have missed? Or in the case of a financial statement, stripping the client's name off of this report, stripping the identifiable information, don't leave bank account numbers and that kind of stuff on there. And then once it has just the raw data, again, allowing it to do some analysis and say, what looks off here? What would you recommend? What are the trends you're seeing in this data? That kind of thing, which can be a really great tool, especially for more junior members on your team. Mm-hmm. Right. So if you think about the kinds of things that, senior and above level people are having to catch on review and give guidance for, and that's taking up their often more expensive time to do so. If instead you have some junior folks on the team and you arm them with these tools and guidelines about how to use it, that they can then check their own work, right? And have like a little bit of a coach built in that can give them feedback. You might have missed this, correct this, change that. And it will ultimately save your organization some extra time on review. So there's definitely ways to use it, but it all has to be driven by your goals. What is the strategy? How are you trying to do this as an organization? And unfortunately, I think the last stats that I heard was that only about 50% of the companies in the US that are currently using generative AI actually have thought through and put together a strategy for how they're doing it. So there's a lot that's happening out there just kind of willy-nilly right now.
Absolutely. A couple things. I think it is so important for all companies to have an AI policy because, like you said, if you don't, your people are still using it. And it's better for you to have a policy that's guiding their use of it rather than you just, again, kind of turning a blind eye. My other question, because the way that you and your team are using it sounds like such a great use of it. I have to ask, have you guys built, kind of custom GPTs for the team to use that fulfill really specific functions like that kind of coach checking work function, or are you just using the AI as a whole? I think listeners would be really interested in hearing that.
Yeah. So that's actually the thing we're working on next / right now. So we've just started to build our first couple
Mm.
custom GPTs. And again, depending on the plan that you have, so in our setup, those are able to be shared and used across the team, right?
Mm.
So yes, we are kind of turning a corner from the trial and error phase and like trying to tweak it and get it right. And now starting to build out some more of those repeatable task GPTs. We haven't yet dabbled into more of like the agent mode, do it for me kind of steps to that. We do use Zapier and other kinds of automation tools to kind of patchwork together automated steps for things, but there's also potential and possibility there as well. I have heard of someone actually tasking ChatGPT in an agent mode to like open QuickBooks and reconcile a bunch of transactions, and you know, it stumbled. It stumbled a lot. Didn't do a great job. Made a bunch of mistakes. Took a really long time. But got a couple things right. And again, if you think about the journey of the last couple of years, it's a sliver of progress that we know is just going to grow and grow. And so that just brings it back to really great, powerful questions for us all to be asking ourselves about what we want our role to be with our clients. And I don't know, I'm a big fan of having the conversation. So if you're not sure what you want that role to be, go grab a few of your favorite clients and take them out to coffee. Have a conversation. What would you like us to focus on in the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Like what would be most valuable to you? It's the most important stuff on your horizon, because in that role as a trusted advisor, the human part is the underlying core that just can't get broken away. And when you
Mm.
lean into that more, I think you're going to create some really sticky relationships.
Martin, I think that actually brings up for me something that I think is really important that we often overlook. I think sometimes we assume, oh, I don't want to tell clients I'm using AI because that's going to make them uncomfortable. But what if we ask them? What if we ask them, what would make you uncomfortable about how I use AI? What would you not, be comfortable with? What would you be comfortable with? And I think that just starting those conversations, like you said, can really inform your strategy and kind of guide your way forward if you're truly just very unsure.
Yeah, I mean the clients will. I think if you get a broad enough group of clients you're asking, you're going to hear a whole lot of different answers because we all have kind of varying degrees of comfort level, right? Even on a personal level, like how we use some of these tools personally. So you might hear a lot of different things, but you will get some feedback that will be really useful to know, okay, there might be a line we don't want to cross somewhere around here. And
Mm-hmm.
then you can start to develop that strategy to stay in bounds with that, and then just talk about it, right? I've
Mm-hmm.
seen some firms do a really great job of publicly sharing their policy, and here is what we do, here is how we use it. Really importantly, here is how we do not use it. Here's what we are not doing, and here's how we are keeping you safe. Because most clients these days are, as we said, like they're using it themselves. They're probably wondering if you are or aren't. And if you kind of come out ahead of it and address it, share with them publicly what your intentions are and how you use this thing and why, maybe even why it's in their interest, what they get out of it, I think you'll see adoption pick up a lot faster overall.
I think that's true. And then also, you don't have to wait for them to ask you, where then you feel like you're put on the defense.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
All right, Martin. Well, is there anything that, we haven't covered yet that you think is really pertinent to this conversation before we wrap up, or did we cover it?
Uh, that last question was actually the thing I was going to point to when you asked before. So, I mean, I think we've done a pretty good job. I'll just leave maybe this one parting thought that organizations who are utilizing these tools, I think the best are the ones that are sharing a lot in a kind of collaborative community way, for sure within their teams, sometimes even across, like you're talking owner to owner, how are you doing things, right? In networking groups and communities that you're a part of, but especially inside your company, inside your team, with your people, making sure that AI is not just like a top-down directive, but that you're getting around the table, everyone at the same level, and saying, what are you guys seeing? Like, how are you doing? What are you using that work? What was the coolest way that you used this week, right? What did you, oh, well, I tried this and I wasn't sure if it was going to work, but it turns out this was really helpful. And then these ideas start to spread throughout your organization. That's a really great way to kind of foster and encourage adoption. And keeping in mind with that too, that studies are showing that the the kind of ease of use of these tools is highest at the high levels of an organization, and it really starts to decrease pretty quickly as you go down the org chart. And if you think about it, a lot of that is because when you talk to a generative tool, you are in a lot of ways performing a function really similar to what it's like to delegate work, right? You have to tell it specific steps, and here's your context, and here's the background you need to know, and da da da. And as leaders, as executives, as managers, directors, right, we're used to that. We're used to giving guidance, instruction, context, all that. And then there will be people on your team where that's not a part of their day-to-day work. They're maybe not used to delegating quite so much. And so that's a really helpful approach to take with working with your team on using these tools, is to make sure that they understand how to think of this thing as somewhere that they can delegate work. And then just talk about that, because they'll be learning the same kinds of tips and tricks that make for successful delegation later, once that employee grows into a manager themselves.
Wow. Now that is an insight that I had never considered. And it makes a lot of sense in my own team context as well, of like, well, why didn't you give it this information? Because they've never been taught to delegate before. Yeah, that is so interesting. Thank you for that parting thought. Well, Martin, if people want to learn more about you and Revel, where are the best places for them to do that?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Martin Kamenski. You'll have my email and stuff or my name in the notes. And then our website, Revel, Revel CPA.com, is a great place to learn more about what we do. And yeah, we'd love to talk, and happy to reach out and talk to anybody that's listening.
Awesome. Well, I'll link to those in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us today.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Finance Marketing Podcast. If you're eager to market your business in a way that feels good and actually gets results, sign up for the Finance Marketing Podcast newsletter in the show notes so you never miss another episode. If you liked what you heard today, please be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite listening app and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We'll see you back here next Friday.